Welcome, welcome, everybody. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, y'all. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Welcome in, welcome in. Let me make sure that y'all are able to chat. Okay, yes, you are able to chat. So as folks are joining, please say hey in the chat. Let us know your name and where you're joining us from. I'm Amanda Chavez Barnes. I'm Senior Director of Programs at Women's March, and I'm joining y'all from Atlanta, Georgia. We're so excited to be hosting this really critical and timely Digital Defenders training for y'all this evening. So thank you so much for joining us. We had about 6,000 people registered for this session, so we're going to give it a little more time as folks are coming in. Um, so in the meantime, definitely say hey in the chat. I'm seeing folks from all around. The chat is moving real quick, y'all. Kentucky's in the house, Hawaii's in the house, Wisconsin, New Mexico, Minnesota, Ohio, New Jersey, Chicago, California, of course, Minneapolis, Massachusetts, Indiana, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Maine, New York, New Hampshire. I'm about to just start singing the 50 Nifty United States song because it looks like we got everybody from pretty much every state represented. It's wonderful to see all y'all here. Please continue saying hey in the chat and letting us know that you're in here.
Here, 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 here.
And I will go ahead and let y'all know that we do have the chat enabled. So the chat is where, you can make comments, connect with other folks who are joining this session. We also have a Q&A spot, and that is where if you have questions, you'll want to put them in the Q&A. So if you are on like a desktop or laptop and you have a bigger screen, if you look at the bottom of your screen where you see our videos, you should see a little question mark symbol with sort of a speech bubble around it. And that is the Q&A. So we would really love if you could put your questions there that they don't get lost because we have a bunch of people on here, which is wonderful, but also means that it's easy for questions to get lost. So please add your Q&A over there. We also have the reactions enabled. So if there's something that's resonating with you or you want to react, um, to something that's being said, yeah, thank you for the hearts. Go ahead and hit that react button and you can, choose one of those emojis to express yourself that way. If you just kind of, just want to express a vibe, but you don't have a full thought to type out. That's another way. We would love to see your engagement. That really helps our presenters, our experts know how y'all are feeling and how y'all are engaging with what they're sharing with you. So I'm gonna go ahead and just give a little introduction and hand it over to our meme queens, our tech experts, Dr. Heather Woods and Dr. Leslie Honor. Thank you all both so much for being here with us this evening and sharing your knowledge and expertise and insights with us. And they're going to break it down for us how the platforms and algorithms shape power, and the ways that these billionaire-owned platforms are operating, so that we can learn how we can outsmart that system and strengthen our resistance online and sharpen our work that we're doing as digital defenders and just make ourselves more effective and stronger as a movement. So once again, thank you both so much for being here. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to y'all.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Dr. Honor, can you share? Groovy. Thanks so much for being here, everybody. We are so excited to be here with you, talking about an issue that is near and dear to our hearts, and is, I think, really important and timely given some of the conversations that we're seeing in the news and just sort of nationally, worldwide. We're so excited to have so many of you here. I do want to share a little bit about myself and Dr. Honor. We're really grateful to the Women's March and to all of you for taking the time and energy out of a a busy day, a busy life, right? To come and learn about these tools and techniques that construct how we engage with each other online. The fact that you've shown up here is an indication that we're making positive moves to fight against what we call sort of neo-oligarchy or a rigged game online. There are almost 700 of you in the chat. Shout out to that, right? And so there are so many of you who are invested in building a better digital future, and we're going to talk about some ways to do that today. So, I am Heather Suzanne Woods. I'm a communication technology expert and strategy advisor. My expertise is in emerging media, digital media, and community resilience. And I'm so excited to be here with all of you, as well as my collaborator and thought partner, Dr. Honor. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Dr. Leslie Honor. I am a researcher of disinformation, visual rhetoric, and community resilience. I study how information systems help make our communities stronger, and we could not be more pleased to be here with you tonight.
Awesome. I also wanted to share, I'm coming to you live from the Midwest where a thunderstorm is a brewing. So I'll keep an eye out. But if you see like thunder flashes or maybe you hear some hail or something, we're working with the environment here. I think Dr. Honor is also experiencing maybe a separate thunderstorm, but we're just going to manage in the moment. But if you see again like weird light shifts or I don't know, it sounds like hail or something, or one of us drops out, we will go with it. We'll just sort of roll. I wanted to share a couple of answers to questions that I saw in the Q&A, which is will this be recorded? The answer is yes. It's currently being live streamed on YouTube and will be available afterwards. You can return to it anytime you would like to. And we would also love, again, for you to use that chat to talk with your fellow resistance digital defenders and also use that Q&A to chat with us. Okay, so Dr. Honor and I teach a lot of courses for a lot of different audiences, and it's really about empowering ourselves to respond to the modern moment, the technological moment. And so today we're going to be talking about technological ecosystems. And we say ecosystems because these technologies that we're talking about today, they don't operate in a vacuum, right? There's not just one device or one technological tool that operates independently of one another, but rather the sort of space that we're seeing online, what we might call the digital sphere or the technological component of the world, is made up of a bunch of different types of technological devices, actors, code, and we're going to break some of that down today. Our goal is really to empower you so that you can leave this meeting, this conversation, this moment together with tools necessary to make change in your community. Dr. Honor.
Yes, tonight we are very much interested in how this training will help us understand how technological actors use algorithms and platforms to influence our digital landscape and shape our capacity to build community and connection. Hold on. What brings us together tonight is a deep desire to resist the sheer flood of disinformation that is distorting our decision-making capacities and flooding our information systems with false beliefs and false information. In other trainings, we have shared how you can fight against mis and disinformation, and we have discussed how community and friendship can help us continue in the struggle and sustain the fight against mis and disinformation. In some of these former conversations, we've given you advice that may seem counterintuitive, right? For example, we talked about not fact checking on a high involvement, high engagement post because that might help disinformation go farther. Tonight, we're going to explain the reasons why that's the case, that our algorithms and platforms shape how we see messages, and when we give air to disinformation, we help it amplify farther. More than that, we're going to break down the key components of our digital ecosystems so that you can advance your own advocacy. We know that social media can be a place for connection, a source of good, and a means of uniting people around shared values. Heather and I started writing about this work in 2015 because we were invested in how people during that 2016 election cycle were using memes and digital commonplaces to build advocacy. More recently, Heather's published an essay on TikTok and how TikTok becomes a space for community and gathering. We know that we can use their digital tools to take back our online spaces. We can build our online communities, but we cannot do it alone, and we need you to be a part of our journey. So let's check in tonight using the chat. What platforms and tools do you use to learn about issues that matter to you? And are those the same platforms that you use to participate in advocacy? And why or why not? So, what platforms do you use for research? What platforms do you use for advocacy? Are they the same? Why or why not? Feel free to drop that into the chat. So I'm seeing Facebook, I'm seeing Substack, Reddit, and TikTok. Are these the places that you seek out information? Good, right? And we're using Reddit and Facebook for both. I'm seeing Substack in terms of how to research and Blue Sky, how to connect. Wonderful. I'm wondering why we see some spaces as more acceptable of our advocacy than others. And I think tonight we'll get into that discussion just a little bit more readily in terms of what that allows. Good. Wonderful answers. We've got Facebook, 1440, Heather Cox Richardson. Great. I love that you all have so many places that you are clearly seeking out for research and that you've already sort of gleaned the idea that we engage in different communication practices in these platforms. Awesome. We avoid Facebook. Your wife uses Facebook, Google for research. You're on a social media cleanse, so we're not doing that right now. I fully affirm the social media cleanse. We all need it at one point or another. Wonderful. Great. Well, at this point, I think you've really got a great understanding of how it is that we use social media platforms, how we use them to seek information, and how those platforms either help or hinder our advocacy. I'd like to hand it off to Heather now so she can talk with you a little bit more on how algorithms and platforms are technologically structured.
Awesome. So yeah, I still see a lot of really great comments happening in the chat. I'm also seeing some people say that they use one type of platform for learning about information and then one type for participating in advocacy. And if that's you, it's probably because you intuit that different platforms do different things, and there are reasons why that's the case. So one of the things that we want to do today, some outcomes or purpose for being here, we want to talk about and learn about and be able to identify threats to democracy online and how platforms participate in it and sometimes incentivize anti-democratic practice. We're going to define some key concepts and tools that underscored previous Digital Defenders trainings, which you can access on YouTube. And we're also going to sort of preview some content that we'll be talking about in our next Digital Defenders training on information security. We're going to practice some proactive communication practices within a technological context that we can't always control. And we want to really focus on influencing our communities online. So the structure of this webinar really asks us to think deeply about the digital tools and spaces that we use to make change. But one thing that we say at the top of every webinar is that your voice matters. If you take nothing else from this training, but the fact that your voice matters, we will be happy. We will sleep well tonight. What we know is that These platforms sometimes disincentivize collective action, and they make you feel like your voice is not important or worthy, or they gaslight you. And so it's so important today and always in these digital defender trainings for us to remind you that your voice matters. You matter. The work that you do matters. And showing up here means that you are already taking steps to make a positive impact on your communities, online and offline. So, as we're thinking about the structure of this webinar, we're going to sort of think about kind of an interesting concept, which is that the digital sphere is made up of humans and non-human actors. So humans are the almost 800 of you in the chat, right? Plus all of your friends that are online, all of your acquaintances, and all of the people that you might interact with or see posts about, people you know, people that you don't know, but also the people who build or maintain or own platforms. These are the human side of the digital sphere. There are also non-human actors that still have significant impact and still communicate. They still determine or influence our ability to make change or communicate online. These include, but are not limited to, platforms like the ones that you were talking about, or Zoom, like we're on now, YouTube, where we're sort of streaming to, Facebook, TikTok, Blue Sky, etc. So platforms are a non-human actor. Code, or the programming that makes platforms run and tells computers how to run. Algorithms are another example of a non-human actor. These are mathematical equations or logics that offer steps for identifying, selecting, sorting, presenting the information you see online. There are also networks that connect all of these bits together into one sort of system. There are also, as we've seen in the chat, bots, robots, like things that are impersonating humans but are very much not. And then increasingly AI, right? Artificial intelligence is coming onto the scene in a way that the folks who have been studying this have both predicted, and also some ways that we didn't predict or anticipate. So we'll talk about those as well. I say all of this because humans and non-human actors interact with one another to create our digital landscape. And if we focus only on one, like humans or non-humans, we don't get the whole story of how our digital spaces are constructed, and we won't be able to effectively participate in the digital defense that we know that all 805 of us are committed to doing, right? So our plan is to explain 3 key elements of the current technological landscape and then help you apply this knowledge so that you can advance your own advocacy and support democratic practice online. Those 3 key elements are: first, we're going to explain why platforms and algorithms are non-human social actors. That is, they influence our social lives and our political and economic lives, even though they're not human. The second is we're going to show some ways that non-human actors like algorithms and platforms influence human capacities to be digital defenders, to resist, to build community. The third thing we're going to do is discuss how we as humans operating within a broader network or ecosystem of both human and non-human actors can sustain this fight, given the technological context. And then finally, we're going to engage in some activities that drive these lessons home. We're going to say this one more time, and maybe actually probably 2 or 3 more times, right? Your voice matters. We're going to get into a little bit of theory. We're going to get into a little bit of evidence. We're not going to go too in depth in the weeds. But again, your voice matters, and we're going to teach you some ways to use it given the context that we exist in. Dr. Honor.
Yeah. Our learning objectives tonight are fairly straightforward. First, we hope you'll understand why and how groups like the far right, as well as white supremacist collectives, are using the internet to radicalize our neighbors and loved ones, to spread false information, and to divide us with fear-mongering. We hope you'll learn how our communication and advocacy practices are influenced by the websites, platforms, algorithms, and other digital tools that we use. We hope you'll learn about proactive messaging that takes into account these technological actors and encourages your messages to spread farther, as well as apply your knowledge to take back our digital space. So let's go ahead and start with digital advocacy basics. We know that digital media is a powerful tool for communication, including both peer-to-peer communication as well as public forms of communication. You're likely here because you know this at a deep level. Our research, Heather and I's work, has shown that social media is key for bringing people together. And in general, digital media can serve as a connective tissue for the community, allowing us to build connections and resilience that we would not have had otherwise. But social media is also important for political communication. As we've known for the last decade, we understand that digital media is a meeting place where we can talk about politics, where we can use trending topics or even memes to find a central meeting place. But digital media is also a place where misinformation, hatred, and violence can spread and circulate very quickly. Some of that is because there are bad actors on the internet who would love to manipulate us and divide us. Some of that is because the structure of the platform incentivizes volatility, virality, attention, and visibility. It doesn't really matter if what's being spread is the truth, and actually mis or disinformation tends to scale higher because it's volatile, right? People love to spread that lie and debate whether or not it exists, and it amplifies that lie. Algorithms, which are the mathematical tools that produce our social media that are embedded, help prioritize engagement and attention because what it's trying to do is bring our attention to the ads and other forms of commercialization that are embedded within platforms. So much of social media activity incentivizes the spreading of mis and disinformation because it's more sensational. This is meant to divide us, of course, but if we use the digital tools in a different way, we can do so much more together. We need a strategy in this situation, and that is just what we hope to do tonight. And with that, I leave it to Heather to talk about the first context, which is ownership.
Yeah. So if I told you that there were only a handful of people who control and own our online spaces, I think probably most of you would say, duh, right? Um, but what we have found is that the concentrated power of just a few people to determine how our online conversations work, how we interact with each other online, that power is significant. So Zuckerberg and Musk and those like them control our access to the digital public sphere because they own and operate the platforms. In many ways, we're playing by their rules and they can change them how they see fit, right? So adaptation becomes key. So what we're going to say in this lesson, we're going to balance both sort of emergent or contingent truths, which is that sometimes things are going to change, with some fundamentals that you can use no matter how the algorithms change over time. And so we want to think about the fact that fundamentally platforms, as non-human actors, they participate in social structures in ways that are biased. So when we encode, when we build code into a system, or when we code a website, we build in the biases and expectations of the people who created it. At the same time, when we host or generate knowledge on a particular platform or we host discussion, we're also contributing to bias because the people who come and participate are participating in ways that could be biased. So one of the things we like to say that sort of is a fundamental takeaway is that platforms reflect society. At the same time, society is produced by platforms. So it's this interesting circle that becomes a wheel. And if we don't stop it and we don't point out the ways in which we're creating less than egalitarian, less than equal, sometimes incredibly biased spaces, it just keeps going and going and going and going. And so platforms are not neutral. They do not exist in a world where they have no sort of impact. Although they like to say that they do, they like to pretend that they just host content. They have said in courts of laws and in public and in Congress, I cannot be held responsible for what happens on my platform, even though what happens on the platform is dependent in large part on the code, the algorithms, the terms of services, etc., that they determine and that they devise. And so when platforms are more interested in shareholders as opposed to the public, then we get what we like to call a neo-oligarchy, which is when power rests in the hands of a few who have the capacity to make really significant change. Platforms do like to suggest, again, that they're neutral parties, that they provide us a place to support deliberation and discussion, but they are determining how that deliberation and discussion happens. So platforms and the people who own them have incredible power to control speech, to determine what users see. And that's why we see a really close connection between the current federal administration and these individuals who own the platforms, right? I say all of this because I want us to have a good, clear picture of what's happening. But I want to say this also, which is that we do see powerful collectives advancing justice online, and you being here is proof of that, right? There's a non-zero chance. In fact, there's a pretty good chance that you found out about this from one of those platforms owned by a couple of bros. And so we want to highlight that fact. I want to show you an example. This is from quite a long time ago, but it's a pretty good example. Facebook has indicated that it perceives itself at various times to be a publisher and not a publisher. It has said that it is a neutral platform, and then other times it said that it has accepted that it's not neutral. And so, depending on what's most productive for the particular platform and their shareholders, they sort of change with the wind. But we have seen that in this last federal election, these platforms do in fact capitulate, often in advance, to the prevailing winds of a political party, right? And so we're seeing this as Facebook, for instance, removed a number of its content moderation strategies and started becoming more neutral or more centrist in responses to criticisms that it was too leftist, for instance. And we've got a wealth of evidence that that is not true, but that was the language at the time. So I wonder, I think we have a check-in next. Why do you think that platforms like Facebook or Twitter, even TikTok, right? Any platforms, why do you think they want us to think of them as neutral or objective? Use the chat. Yeah, so I'm seeing larger audience, bigger revenue. Yeah. So we trust the information that they see. So they're not liable. That's a big part, right? If they're just hosts of content and then they can't control what's happening, they're not responsible for it. There have been, I think that's a matter of opinion. We might argue something different than they do to hide their surveillance technology. Yeah, I mean, and there's something to be said about that. We're going to speak a little bit more about that in our info security section or our digital defenders. Yeah, they can make money without consequence. Yeah, so it's in large part a way to sort of sidestep consequence. If they're just a platform that hosts, if they're neutral or objective, then they're not responsible if somebody is radicalized on their platform, and we are seeing radicalization. So let's move on to context number two, which is that algorithms and platforms shape communication and advocacy online. There are entire courses taught about algorithms. We're going to keep it pretty tight here. But algorithms are literally sort of procedures for computation or for problem solving. Um, there are lots of different ways to think about this. My partner is really invested in cardinal directions. So like when I am trying to get somewhere new, they say turn right, go west 3 blocks or a mile or whatever. Whereas I grew up in a way that when I give directions, I'm like, you drive for 5 minutes and then you turn left at the tree, right? Or you turn right at the big building. Those are examples of two different algorithms that produce potentially the same consequence if you can read both my sort of like spatialized narrative versus their like more cardinal directions. Oh, there my lights went. Those are algorithms. If any of you are caretakers and helping children learn math, the algorithms that I learned for math might not be the algorithms that your children know for math because there's been a switch in how we teach math. And so if you've ever been like, this is not how I learned long division or multiplication, that's actually an algorithmic problem. I share all of this because algorithms seem scary, and to some extent they can be because they provide directions for how technology operates. But I want to bring them back to say that they are human, or that they're results of humans. Humans can make and remake algorithms. Here's why they're important in this context. Algorithms determine what we see, when we see it, and how we see it. So they construct our social media, they construct things like search, they help us determine what we see based on, for instance, relevance. We know that algorithms can prioritize certain types of emotion or sentience. There's been some really interesting studies with certain platforms, even affecting elections, based on their interest in skewing either positive or negative in tone. And algorithms influence our digital defense strategies. They have political power because they sort, because they categorize, because they classify. And once we take information and we start putting it in categories, or we take people or communities and classify them, we're starting to move into a place where bias and power come into play. So I'm thinking about maybe a less nefarious example of this. I am obsessed with TikTok. I write papers about it, but I'm also a user of TikTok. And I have found that people get really excited when they find a particular community on TikTok. Like I found X Talk. Let me think of an example like fantasy talk, right? Or book talk. Book talk is something that I see a lot. That is an example of algorithmic sorting. It's taking people who have a shared interest and putting them into a collective community through sorting. We also know that if we search a search engine, we Google, for instance, what comes to the top and what goes to the bottom is determined by an algorithm. Oop, we lost Dr. Honor. It might have been the weather. Um, all of this is to say that we're prioritizing different things over others. We're prioritizing one kind of keyword or hashtag over the other. We're prioritizing one kind of post over the other. And these prioritizations happen when we think about what the platform wants to advance or what the platform wants to make visible. So prioritizing one kind of post over another might matter if we're thinking about engagement or video or photos or links. So I saw somebody in the chat say, how can I, as an LGBTQIA business owner, deal with the fact that these algorithms are constantly changing. They are. And part of that is sort of realizing that we have to play that game and sort of work through that game. Yeah. So algorithms do, in fact, have political power because they direct attention. Looks like Dr. Honor got bumped out, maybe, Amanda. I'm not sure if you can re-invite her. Yeah, cool. Let me chat Dr. Honor here. Platform logics in real time, am I right?
The same link should work if she's able to click it and get back in.
She's also dropped out of our shared doc. So perhaps it's a social media. Perhaps it's she might be, could be thunderstorms.
Yeah, I was wondering if that I posted in the chat. Sorry, y'all, bear with us. Dr. Woods, thank you so much to you and Dr. Honor because they're experiencing major thunderstorms in their areas and still leading this webinar. So apologies for the technical difficulties. We'll get it sorted out. My guess is that her Wi-Fi went down.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna keep rolling for what I think was probably a slide or two, then we'll pause and see how she's doing. I think I was talking about how algorithms have political power because they direct attention. Does that sound right? I'm seeing
Yep.
some concepts in the chat. Groovy. Let's keep rolling. Okay. Algorithms like platforms and much of the tech world are assumed to be neutral, objective, mathematical, and therefore without bias or politics. But research has shown again and again and again that humans build bias into machines. Oh, and here comes Dr. Honor. All right, welcome back. Welcome back to
Yay!
we were talking about algorithms, assuming that they're like technically neutral or objective. But again, yeah, research has shown again and again that humans build bias into machines. There's an incredible book by Safiya Noble, Dr. Noble, called Algorithms of Oppression, in which she lays out just an absolutely incredible and devastating case about how Google builds in bias, particularly against Black women and women of color. And then finally, algorithms do in fact change, so we must be aware of it. The same way that algorithms are important actors, platforms also orient our communication in some important ways. You have just seen what happens when we lose access to a platform. And this is sort of something that is built in to various systems, the ability to have access to Wi-Fi, the ability to have access to stable electricity, all of those concepts come into play here as well. But different platforms are also structured differently based on what the content is, the methods of circulation of content. So on TikTok, it's hashtags. On Facebook, it's more topic based, the frequency or circulation of content. So if you are a TikTok person, you know that the time ratio, what we would call the temporality or anything related to the quickness or speediness, that affects how platforms work. The audience of a particular platform matters. So we know that certain groups use Facebook over TikTok. Some people use Snapchat. Some people use Blue Sky. The audience of a particular platform matters. And then the moderation of a platform matters, whether or not there is any, whether or not it's done by humans, or whether or not it's done by AI. So these differences make some platforms more effective than others for developing a resistance strategy. And one of the things that we want you to take away is that you can choose the tool that's best for you, thinking about audience and thinking about algorithms. So in our next Digital Defenders program, we're going to talk about using encrypted chats, for instance, like Signal, to do some of the important work of organizing. Or I'm also thinking there's a Women's March Slack that we participate in. We would call these, productive tools or productive platforms to use. But if you're trying to organize a war effort, allegedly, maybe don't do it on Signal, right? And so choose the tool that you need for allegedly. Choose the tool that you need for the strategy you're trying to affect in the moment, right? Um, Platforms are part of ecosystems. What happens on a particular platform threads into a broader ecosystem. And we're going to follow up a little bit more on what that looks like, but it's also the reason why our last session was about friendship and community, because the networks and the humans and the non-human actors can be bolstered or can be altered by the way that we engage with each other online. So again, the fact that we're all together, 800 of us plus, despite technical difficulties, is an indication that we can shape our communities and our spaces online in really effective and productive ways. The final context we have before we start getting into a little bit more of the actual application is that parts 1 and part 2 is all connected. We need to think about the platforms, the algorithms, the code, the human and non-human actors all together. We need to think about ways, again, that we have relative forms of privacy. We talked about this in our last Digital Defenders program. What the choices that we make affect others because most of our information is networked. So if, for instance, Dr. Honor has an affiliation with me, something that I post might show up for her, or people who the algorithm think that I am like or could be like, right? And so privacy is networked. It also means that certain platforms might be better for private work over others. And we'll talk again a little bit more about that, but this is sort of a preview. What we do does affect other people's safety, which is why we can't be individualistic when we're thinking about this work. We have to be thinking about our collective liberation and the fact that what one of us does affects the other. We also want to think about the ways that we can make choices that are right for ourselves, but also take into account that other people might have variable levels of risk. My level of risk, I have a significant amount of privilege for a lot of different reasons, and I can be maybe a little bit more visible than some others can. But even if I'm visible and I act, what I do can affect others online. We also want to do, again, a preview of next month's Digital Defenders about keeping ourselves safe. We're going to talk about being in public and why being online or in person in public is always a risk. Again, not everybody has the same level of risk. We generally recommend that you assume everything is not private. And we'll talk about some basic tools for increasing levels of safety and privacy, knowing that some digital defense is often better than nothing, and there are layers that we can attach. So we've covered a lot of content. We have had technical difficulties. I'm seeing some lightning in the distance. I'm taking it as a sign that we're making moves. Oh, there was another one. Ooh, okay. I've lived around thunderstorms my entire life, and I still am just totally encapsulated by them. Let's do a check-in. How about what are some ways your social media content might be affected by algorithms or by platform structures? Bias, ads. I'm seeing bubbles. Yeah, or echo chambers. That's a real concern that algorithms shuttle people into a particular type of content that they don't see anything else.
Some
Post,
shadow banning, yeah.
yeah, shadow banning, I saw that too. Filtering what you can say. Yeah, somebody mentioned something that's really important, which is once you click on a topic, you're more likely to see more uh, components or examples of that topic. Here comes the thunder. All right, I take that as affirmation. Yeah, so if you click, somebody said, if I click on posts about basset hounds, I'm going to see more basset hound content. And like, who wouldn't want to see more basset hound content because the ears, right? But also, that can quite literally move people into sort of echo chambers or can be an on-ramp for radicalization if you're not doing something as adorable as Basset Hound clicking, right? And so that is also something that you can take away. Once you click on something or you engage in a particular conversation, there's a good chance you'll see it in the future. So be careful also where you choose to direct your time, attention, and energy. Yeah. Okay, great. I'm seeing so much good stuff in the chat. You all are so smart. We're really so excited to be here with you. Uh, Thunder and lightning notwithstanding. Um, Maybe let's transition to some more communication lessons for application. Dr. Honor, you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. So now that Heather has given us this rich information on how algorithms and platforms shuttle our information and change how our messages travel, we need to be able to apply these lessons and be able to game our communication so that our messages reach the right audience or a bigger audience or a broader audience. How do we take this rich information and put it into practice? The goal, of course, is to become stronger digital communicators that take into account what platforms allow us to do, how algorithms are structured, and how is it that the structure of those platforms and algorithms shape what messages are seen or not. So let's talk about the first strategy. The first strategy of battling disinformation by understanding algorithms and platforms is to understand that when we respond to disinformation, we are engaging in amplification. And when we ignore or report disinformation, we are engaging in minimization. So let's talk about fact checking as one type of amplification. Let's imagine ourselves scrolling on Facebook and we see a post from Governor Greg Abbott where he lies about the school voucher programs and how they would affect Texas schools. Now, most of us would want to immediately fact check that post and comment on that post and respond to it, or even talk about Governor Greg Abbott's post and repost it. But that wouldn't necessarily be the best decision. And that wouldn't be the best decision because while fact checking may feel good to us, and while fact checking Governor Greg Abbott would feel particularly good to me, right, it doesn't necessarily mean that that will have larger change. While we are correct, and while it feels incredibly empowering to see the truth posted online, when we respond to those types of disinformation or messages, we are in fact amplifying that content by spreading that message to more peoples and broader audiences than it would have found a home with. So we know that fact checking doesn't help us battle disinformation as much as it should. And so we need to be careful not to platform disinformation inadvertently through that fact checking impulse that we all have. We also know that despair and outrage can be a form of amplification. Right now, many of us want to express how angry we are about the circumstances, and we have every right to feel that anger and to feel that outrage. But tactically, we need to think of our communication in a much more strategic way. If we were to simply post messages of despair and outrage without a forward-looking action plan, then we may ultimately hurt our efforts at organizing a resistance or stronger strategies. So being able to shape messages with a tactical, future-focused action is important. So gaming our communication needs to remember that algorithms are fueled by engagement, volatility, and attention. And we must be able to use our energy and attention or lack of attention in quite strategic ways. So let's talk about some further strategies we can use to game our communication. Last time we talked about positive communication, and as a brief reminder, positive communication is not happy communication. It is not joyful communication. It is instead a strategic vantage point of your message. And that strategic vantage point is accurate, authentic, and seeks future-focused community actions that help the community determine what to do. Those messages might revolve around emblems or icons, and we'll dig into how those emblems and icons help messages spread farther in a moment. But ideally, some positive communication, what it does is helps our messages become stronger. So examples include sharing authentic local stories, perhaps from a local journalist or a person on the street, using our own perspective to share concerns that we have, as well as actions that the audience could take. Amplifying the good work of individuals or justice organizations that you follow, as well as sharing accurate, actionable information. That's particularly true in a time of crisis or in a time of heavy disinformation. That accurate information is fairly radical in that context. And then, of course, the final example would be speaking to your community with respect and to invite collaboration on future-focused actions. So how is it that we can game the algorithm with these technological strategies? The first tool that we can use is our timing. The timing of our messages needs to correspond to as events emerge and their life cycle on the internet. As most of us know, any meme, any viral trending topic has a short lifespan. And so the goal is to be able to meet that lifespan before you become too cringe to make it be effective in any way. We also know that digital media has peak visibility windows. So if you're someone who's on Facebook, posting during lunchtime is a peak visibility window. If you're on X, posting in the morning is a peak visibility window. If you're on Instagram, lunchtime, evenings, and weekends are peak visibility times. You also want to be aware of the broader context, thinking back to that cringe example. If you don't remember, for Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election, she talked about having Pokemon go to the polls, and it was so cringe because she was well beyond the lifespan of that meme. Or more recently, we've seen the Democrats pick up the choose your fighter meme on TikTok, and it hasn't landed well, mostly because public discourse has insisted that the Dems aren't fighting, and the meme trend died out about a year ago. So timing is essential to having our messages become effective and spread wider. We also know that hashtags and keywords are important to our circulation. Hashtags and keywords help shuttle your messages in different ways. And platforms use hashtags or keywords in different modalities. So if you're on TikTok, hashtags are still a primary way that content is organized. But if you're on X, you don't need to use hashtags. The keywords in your post would be how those would be pulled and aggregated to sort of shuttle information in a similar manner to hashtags. So as we think about these hashtags, we also want to investigate the hashtags that are central to our communities and be able to use them in strategic ways. So I'm a member of the chronically ill community. One of the hashtags or keywords that we use all the time is spoons and spoonies to talk about our energy levels and how we manage those levels. So using communication that picks up on the hashtags of the spoonie community and uses that to effect helps gather your audience and speaks to them in a language that resonates. Finally, we also want to use creative language within the context of a community. We both want to note what hashtags and keywords are used by the opposition as well as allies. And we want to be able to use language that speaks to members who are in community with us, who feel the same way as us. We also want to use creative language in our messaging that highlights the most predominant takeaway. So if I coach students on social media messaging, what I usually tell them to do is narrow the language and wording of whatever they're doing as small as possible and focus on key words and terms that drive home the lesson at a simple glance or as quickly as possible. Finally, we want to avoid the language of the oppressor. Because we are immersed in disinformation, we are surrounded by terms that try to harm us and make us feel less powerful. We know that in conditions of fascism, that fascists regularly use the language of dehumanization to get the broader public to care less about those that they've been dehumanizing and to not act. So by using our language in a way that resists the language of the oppressor, we are trying to push on the humanity that needs to be central to the movement and central to battling disinformation. So for example, if the Trump administration keeps using the phrase illegals or criminals to refer to migrants, that is a time period which we can use the phrase migrants to push back against that dehumanizing framework. And finally, the last tactic in our technological toolbox is to go multimedia. First, we would want to use audio. So I know that adding trending audio to your content will help it go farther. And if you can scoop up a new trending audio within its first 8 hours, you will be shocked at how far your message will go. We also want to choose audio that speaks to a particular community. So Chapel Rowan is having a moment, and The Giver might be something you would want to use to speak to a community that's focused on change. We also would want to add lyrics or other content from audio to our visual media to help it create an enriching experience and to build out the technological structures that help that message shuttle across the internet. You also would want to include images. In May, we're going to be talking in a great more detail about how images and icons help galvanize a community and how fandoms can use those images to great effect. But for today, I want you to think about how you can include images in your posts. Can those images be something that you took? Would those images be something that is a meme that's trending right now, but is not yet to the cringe point? Or would it finally be a meme or a type of graphic that you found from another source that you're reposting? Or perhaps one that you made yourself? We know that images play a central role in the circulation of platforms, and our messages go much farther when we use those images in tactical ways. I also encourage folks to add alt text to the images when you post them online. Technologically, that helps the message spread, as well as it increases the accessibility of your messaging for more peoples. So let's go ahead and apply this wonderful knowledge that we've just learned. Let's imagine you see a state house representative in Texas spreading a lie about school vouchers. We'll go back to our school vouchers example. The state representative says the vouchers would be worth far less than the bill truly states. Using your knowledge of algorithms and platforms, how could you craft a stronger, more accurate response? So the situation is a state rep is lying on Facebook about school vouchers. Many of these answers include how we game our communication, but some answers are better than others. So what would you do? Would you A, generate a post that uses a graphic you found from ProPublica to explain how vouchers would accurately impact students? Would you B, repost a story from a local teacher that explains how vouchers would impact her classroom, ensuring that you include her original hashtags and your own in the repost? Or C, generate a video on Facebook that talks about the truth of vouchers and uses both hashtags and trending audio? Or finally, D, repost the original lie about vouchers and explain how much this lie could hurt students? So using the chat, which one of these do you think is the most useful in terms of gaming our communication via our knowledge of algorithms and platforms? Which one do you think? Okay, I'm seeing a lot of C's and B's, right? Love it. Love it. Awesome. Y'all are so smart. It's so fun to teach when you all just get it so quickly. Brilliant people. Brilliant, all of you. Yay. Okay, so what you're seeing is kind of what we're reflecting here, that the goal is not to repost the original lie because that would amplify the negative messaging. The goal is to create traction in public discourse by reusing images from other locations, by using our own authentic and accurate perspective, and by speaking to our community with hashtags, keywords, and language tools that help us connect. Yeah, this is really wonderful. Awesome. Awesome. Good job, y'all. And we cannot force feed the Dems this information, but we appreciate your vote of confidence. Awesome. Thank you so much. And for those of you who just asked, alt text is a description of the image that you put with the image when you post it. So if you're, say, posting on Facebook and you click on the image, you can add an alt text descriptor, which would be a brief description of what is included in the image. Right.
Dr.
Thank
Hahn,
you. Go ahead.
which,
Yes.
which is your favorite of A through D, knowing that some of them are maybe better than others, there's not a single right answer. Which one is your favorite?
Honestly, I think B is my favorite, but only because I'm a little lazy sometimes and I don't want to make my own content. And so I think as a quick mechanism of fighting disinformation, that repost would be there. But also that C answer is a really good answer. Because if you're coming up with your own content and you're using that trending audio and those hashtags, you're going to be surprised at how far your message goes. So be ready for that if you engage in that tactic. It is a powerful one. And that again points us back to this grand idea that your voice matters. And using these tactics and tools to game the platform and algorithms will help your voice become stronger and connect to the right people and the right community advocacies. Okay. Heather, do you have any last thoughts here?
My
All
last
right.
thought is actually something that you mentioned, which is that there were people in the chat who said, if I've got the time, and am I using this right? The spoon, like if I've got the time and
Yes.
the energy, I'm gonna choose C, but if not, maybe B or A. So I love that we caught that too. Yeah.
Yes. And as a spoonie, I also feel the same. Wonderful job, y'all. Don't forget that your best influence is local, and being able to share content from your perspective is important in terms of how we use that voice. So don't forget that you have a great deal of influence with your friends and family and acquaintances that follow you. So before we leave tonight, before you go, don't forget that you have power in this fight and we can be stronger together. Be safe in the way that you engage, and please come back next month so we can teach you more about information security. Before you go, what is one thing you've learned about platforms, algorithms, and power? If you could drop that in the chat for us as our exit ticket, which is our ritual to sort of culminate the class, we would be so delighted. Thank you so much for hanging with us tonight. Despite our technological difficulties, it's been a blast.
Thank you both so much. Please show some love to Dr. Honor and Dr. Woods, everybody. And don't forget to let us know in the chat what's one thing you learned from this webinar. There were so many things, just one thing, if you can drop it in the chat before you leave. Thank you all so much. And we will send a follow-up email that links to the recording, as well as letting y'all know about upcoming sessions so that you can come back and join Dr. Woods and Dr. Honor for another Digital Defender session. Thanks, everyone. We're going to leave the chat open for a little bit so everybody can drop their responses. Appreciate y'all.
So stoked.
Amazing responses. The power of alt text. Don't spread the lie.
Not to emphasize lies by passing them on. We can make a
Yeah.
difference. Yes. Yes. Avoid the language of the oppressor.
You're
Timing.
giving me life, y'all. I love it.
I want to print this out and like wallpaper my house with it.
I think you should.
It's so good.
Yeah, y'all are so great. Don't amp the right. Love it.
Yeah.
Oh, there was one thing we didn't have time tonight to answer all of the questions that are in the Q&A, but we can take a look at these and incorporate it into our follow-up.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. Have a great night, everybody.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, team.